is Karen. I grew up in the north of England. I live in Australia. I have 3 children and I'm a life coach and a specialist in bullying and confidence and self-esteem building. I'm the 3rd of 7 children. I suppose because there were so many of us, I guess, we had a fairly isolated life, as in we were very self-sustaining. Our home life was our world. We couldn't really fit all of us in the car. And I found myself to be very socially awkward, very shy and quiet and easily intimidated. I felt that I didn't have a good grasp on how to interact in the real world or how to relate to people in the real world, and I felt always a little bit behind everybody else. And so whenever I was teased or people were unkind to me, I always took it as a reflection of me being not as good as them, not as smart as them, not as integrated, not as switched on. So I had kind of 2 lives. I lived 2 lives. One where I was really comfortable. I was comfortable at home. I was comfortable with my animals. I was very lost in my animals, horse riding. I used to spend a lot of time out horse riding. And then when I was at school, I felt awkward and unwelcome a lot of the time and rejected and insecure, and I never really understood the dynamics. As it turned out, because we went to a Catholic school, the majority of the children there were sort of heavily practicing Catholics, and my family were mildly practicing Catholics. So there were all sorts of prejudices and behaviours that I found really confusing. I found it really confusing that you could get in trouble simply for how many times you did or didn't go to church, or you could get in trouble for being too skinny, or you could be criticised for having a horse, or you could be criticised for having too many brothers or too big a family. There are all these criticisms that I felt really acutely, and because I suppose I grew up in a fairly isolated way, I felt that other people understood the world better than me, and so therefore I was in the wrong. I felt really like I wasn't valuable or respected, or I felt odd. I felt like I was odd. When my parents told us that we were moving to the Ivory Coast, we had very different reactions in the family. So I had a horse, 2 horses, and I rode all the time. I just started to break out of the awful inhibitions that I had been tortured with. Just started. I'd been to my first sort of couple of youth clubs and first couple of parties, and was starting to sort of experience myself as slightly adult at 15. And yeah, things were changing for me. Life was just starting to really make sense. And when my parents told me we were moving to Africa, I thought it was the worst thing ever. It was the pits. I didn't want to go. So when we first arrived in Africa, the first impression I got as the doors opened on the plane was the heat, but damp, humid heat. And it's almost like taking a breath was slightly different. It was a different kind of air. It's quite heavy air. My parents did tell me we were going for 2 or 3 years. As it turns out, we stayed for 8. The only English girl in a country for 8 years. I was the only one that lived there. And then I had a friend, a lovely friend, who got a job working on Walt Disney film, and they needed help. She needed help with photocopying, and I went over there on the weekend, and I was standing in the Walt Disney office photocopying, and this man walks in the room and looks at me and then falls flat on the floor, on his front like that, just falls face down on the floor. And then he looks up and he said, "Please, please, please, can you work on our film? Please, 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 can you work on our film?" I'm looking at him, I'm like, what? As it turns out, so they needed a woman or a girl who was about 5'8" with dark hair and slender, to be a stand-in for the lead actress, Sean Young. The French people and the Lebanese that were there, the majority of which were not. I think I literally was the tallest person in the country, and they've been really, really struggling, and they can believe it. I walk in there and start doing photocopying. So then they really wanted me to work on the film, and I got a job and went to work on location. So that was really great. So the way that worked was I would get up every morning at 5 and catch a taxi to the hotel, and we would go from the hotel then normally out into the bush or somewhere. Sometimes it was done at the hotel, some they built sets, but most of the time we went out on location. First day when I first went on set, they didn't know that I was English speaking, so because I was with people that they'd hired as stand-ins were all French speaking, so I'm standing around with them talking, chatting away in French, and all the crew were all running around and organising and pointing and whatever. I didn't say anything, I didn't let on for a while because I thought it would be fun. And then yeah, they found out I spoke English, and that was just the best because then we could have a lot of fun too. Very, very, very enriching and powerful. That was a really powerful experience for me, considering how shy and how introverted I was prior, how much difficulty I had integrating. It was like I found my people. And then when we finished my part in the film, the director said to me, look, he said, we're having such a lot of fun with you on set, will you stay, because you keep everybody really cheerful and we have such a good time and it's really nice having you around, so will you stay until the end of the shoot? So I did. Living in Africa taught me how to be flexible. I'd grown up in a very contained environment, and it taught me that you can actually be extremely flexible, more than you ever imagined. When I chose to embrace the experience, I became not only happy, but I became fulfilled, I became empowered, I became more fun, but I also became enlightened as to how valuable other people are. It was a beautiful experience and a powerful experience, and it forms so much of what I do today. The fact that pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone and putting yourself in a place where you are vulnerable and opening up your arms and opening up your heart and having a good look at the possibilities that surround you changes everything. And that's all inside your head.